My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior.
Hi everyone, welcome to day two. Welcome to week 2 of our Crazy Love Book Club, and this week we are going over chapters 4 and 5. And as I was reflecting just through this process, and I've been in a lot of book clubs, and with the virtual book club idea, of course it's different, obviously, because y'all aren't like right here with me, but like I just wanted to be more relaxed and laid back, because when I was physically in book clubs, obviously we could interact, talk back and forth. It was usually relaxed at somebody's house, like it was chill. So I'm trying to learn just how to like chill out, like it's chill. This isn't like a lecture. We're talking about a book. Now, the book been banging me on my head. Okay, so I can't be but too relaxed when I'm reading it, because I'm like, dang, Francis, he was going in. But anyways, and of course, if you guys haven't noticed, I have a new hairstyle. You guys are probably like, how we're like a minute in and I still haven't got to the whole point. So anyways, this week we're going over chapters 4 and 5. So let's just get into it. Chapter 4 was called The Profile of the Lukewarm. Now, for those of you who are reading the book with me, y'all know. And for those of you who are thinking about reading the book, you gonna know. This chapter, I probably, could have highlighted the whole chapter. I probably could have highlighted both chapters 4 and 5 in its entirety. Which isn't the point of highlighting, because you're supposed to actually highlight key points. So anyways, it's just like too much. There's no way that I can do a concise video addressing every single aspect. I would really literally, I could probably spend a full month of videos on just one chapter at a time. So I'm really only gonna highlight just a few things and just paraphrase greatly. If you guys don't know, I do blog as well to go along with this. So my blogs have all the scripture references and more details of anything I bring up, and usually more things that I don't even bring up. So if you're into reading or just like to also read to go along with the video, then make sure you do that. The link is always going to be in the bio for in the description down below, not in the bio. We are not on Instagram. So the link for the link for the blog is going to be down below in the description box under this video. And for all of my Trinity Love Tuesday videos, there's always going to be a blog to go with it. So that's just all the announcements. So let's actually get into it. Again, chapter 4 is called Profile of the Lukewarm, and he went over like a list of things, or a list of a list of characteristics, let's just use a word we know how to say, of people who are lukewarm, or traits of people who are lukewarm. And he didn't address every single thing. Obviously, there are tons of things that he could have addressed. And also, everybody has lukewarm tendencies because we're human. So nobody has it all together. This isn't meant to point out things about other people. It's meant to point out things about ourselves. In Corinthians, it tells us to examine our hearts. Examine ourselves. Don't be looking around and reading the book like, yeah, I know so-and-so act like that. Or I know some people who go to my church who act like that. Like, no. What do you act like? Focus on yourself. Focus on yourself. So he talked about some of the things like, going to church faithfully, but not actually having a relationship with Christ. And a lot of the examples he gave really go along with that. Just kind of following rituals, but not really following Christ. Being, a good church goer, a good church person, but not actually being a Christian, which is a Christ follower. So I encourage you to just go over those things and examine yourself as to how on fire for Christ are you for real? Like, are you just halfway in there doing stuff that is just like halfway there? And I had to think about that for myself too. One of his quotes that he says is, "The American church is a difficult place to fit in if you want to live out New Testament Christianity. Most of us want a balanced life that we can control, that is safe, and that does not involve suffering." And the reason why he brought that up, because one, in Philippians 3 and 10, it talks about suffering with Christ, like not just getting his blessings or the good parts of him or the scriptures that go along with what we are feeling that day or that moment, but like the entirety of the Bible, the entirety of the Christian experience of following Christ includes suffering. It doesn't include everything going well, everything being in control, a perfect little life. It just doesn't include that. And some of the lukewarm aspects of our life are because we want to pick and choose what we want to do and pick and choose how we follow Christ. And Christ says to give all, which is why he talks about people being lukewarm. He is going to spit them out, which is, Francis goes into like the Hebrew and the Greek word for that and all the background, but it's basically like vomiting, like we're regurgitating, not just like regular saliva spit. So you have to be all the way one or the other. It's definitely black and white. In the middle is not really, it's no point. You need to be all the way there or not. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect. So I'm actually going to go right into chapter 5 because they kind of tie together in a way. They really go hand in hand. So chapter 5 is called Serving Leftovers to a Holy God. So one of the quotes that he uses that goes along with being hot or cold but not being perfect, and he quotes, "The distinction is perfection, which no one will obtain on this earth, in a posture of obedience and surrender where a person perpetually moves toward Christ." It's a journey and a process. So while nobody can be perfect, you can be actively moving toward Christ. There's a difference between actively moving towards Christ and just kind of halfway doing stuff and just sitting around like whatever, or giving him leftovers. Like the last 5 minutes of your day after you're already tired, now you fall asleep during a prayer. Or, quick little drive-through prayer when you are serving your food or over your food, a little quick prayer. But we can give all this energy to a job, all this energy to human relationships, all this energy to something we like to do, all our energy to social media, all our energy to working out, all our energy to all these other things. And then when it comes to God, it's like, oh, well, we have the leftover energy after doing everything else. And what's left for God? Like leftovers. A lot of us get in the habit of comparing ourselves to the world. As Christians, comparing ourselves to the world. And if we're going to do that, then we might always seem like we have it together, and we might always assume that we are good soil. If you are familiar with the parable he uses in the Bible about the different soils and how the seed only flourishes in one type of soil. We get caught up in comparing ourselves to the secular world, and basically, let's say if our faith was meat on a bone, and this is an example he uses, hopefully I don't butcher it, but if our faith and our relationship with God is meat on a bone, we think, oh, well, I have more meat on my bone than them people in the world, so I'm good. Instead of comparing ourselves to following Christ, which has the full flourishing, full, nice, tender, full meat, all of it. And that goes into like leftover sacrifices. He talks about how in the Bible, again, the blog will have more details in the actual scriptures, but in the Bible, the God talks about, I think it's in Malachi, when God was encouraging people not to give sloppy sacrifices. Like there were people who had nice animal sacrifices, like, well, not nice. They had nice animals, but they choose the ones with spots or the ones that weren't perfect to give as sacrifices instead of the ones that were perfect. They kept the ones that were perfect for themselves. So God doesn't want that. He's like, why would you give me the worst of your time, the worst part of your day, the little 2 minutes when you're tired and exhausted from doing everything else besides spending time with me, you know? And so God is just encouraging us. Like, he wants your all. He wants your first fruits and then all the rest. Like, he wants it all, not just what we feel like giving him here and there. The chapter just talks a lot about just giving God your all. And as much energy as we like to put in a lot of these things of the world, and that doesn't necessarily mean sin. It could be you're doing great, you're doing good things, but are they what God has called you to do? And it just requires us to a deeper examination of our hearts and what are we actually doing? Like, Are we actually following Christ with our all, or are we just giving him bits and pieces because it's convenient, giving him the convenient pieces versus everything? He also gives an example about like a bag of chips that he had, or a bag of chips that he was looking at where the label was no trans fat. And we've seen it all before. A lot of these labels, you know, fat-free, gluten-free, no trans fat, whatever. But in his example, he's talking about a bag of chips that says no trans fat as the main label in the front. And then in the back, when he looked at the ingredient list, it was a whole bunch of poisonous things that were not good. And then there was like an ingredient in there that was a form of trans fat, but there wasn't enough of it to be considered enough, so they could still call it zero trans fat. So it was just like the label was just for show, but the actual ingredients, what the chips were made of, is what actually counts. And that's what we really need to think about as we're examining ourselves. Like, do we have the label of Christian, but what we're actually made of doesn't actually line up with following Christ and following every aspect of him? Not just bits and pieces, but every aspect of it. So that includes the good and the bad, because that also includes suffering. Christ didn't just go around, you know, la-di-da, picking up joy. He was picking up a cross at the end of that. So just like, it's just something for us to really think about. And it really hit me, because one thing that resonated with me was I have found myself comparing myself to the world and finding validation in that. Well, I don't do that, so I'm good. And it's like, no, I don't need to compare. Now, I'm still hungering and thirsting after Christ, but my comparison should be to Christ, not to the world. I don't do that. I don't curse. I don't smoke. I don't whatever. All of that don't matter. The things that I don't do don't matter. The things that I do matter. And I think that's what we need to be focused on. What are you doing as you're following Christ, as you're getting to know him? Don't worry about any of that the extra stuff, comparing to anybody else. Comparing yourself to what Christ calls us in the Bible. All of it. Not just bits and pieces of what feels good, but all of it. But yeah, I really encourage you all to read this book. If you aren't reading with us, you can start today. You can start next month whenever you're able to get the book. Read it. It's a really, really good read. And those who are reading with me, let me know your thoughts and anything you guys want to talk about. But yeah, this is all for this week's video, and next week we're going to be reading chapters 6 and 7, so make sure you come back over next Tuesday to join me with that. And I think that's actually all. I always be saying and then I go into a whole nother rant about something else, but no, we're gonna end it. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember to love always. Bye.
I'm yours and you mine.